Okay, here we go. So this is welcome to our Smart Counsel Series here at Samuel, Sayward, and Baylor. We are an estate planning, elder law, probate, and trust administration firm in Dedham, Massachusetts. And we do a Smart Counsel series on about a quarterly basis where we educate and appreciate our clients out there. So tonight's topic is going to be about college planning for your young adult. And I have Aaron Ladd, who's the managing director, and Larry Dannenberg, who is the founder of College Solutions. And so they will introduce themselves a little bit more when they start their presentation. But first, I wanted to provide you with a few notes so you know how to navigate today's webinar. So first, if you have any questions this evening, then please add them to the Q&A or chat sections or panels, the toggles down there at the very bottom. It's the bar that you should be able to glide your arrow over on the very bottom of the screen. So you can add any questions there. And Aaron and Larry may answer some of those questions as they go through their presentation. Otherwise, they will have a quick question and answer section at the end of their presentation. A couple of other things to note is that, again, as I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded, just so that you're aware. And also, Larry and Aaron are going to give their presentation first, and then I will follow up with mine after their question and answer section. So without further ado, let's get started. Take it away, guys.
Thanks for having us, Abigail. This is Aaron Ladd with College Solutions. We're a firm based here in the Metro West of Boston area. I myself grew up in the area. I grew up in Lexington and then worked at Babson College in Wellesley for several years. And I worked with Larry now for several years and helping kids find the right fit for college. That's really our dedicated process of helping them early and often to reduce stress and find the right fit socially, academically, and financially. And we'll touch upon a lot of those points at various facets during our presentation. So I'm going to share my screen to help walk through a PowerPoint presentation that just gives some visuals along the way. As mentioned, feel free to ask questions as we go or chime in at the end there. So in addition to Larry and I, we're also buoyed by a couple other great counselors who provide expertise in various facets, as well as a team of writing coaches. So a student gets paired with a counselor and a writing coach to help through the application process. We have competitions annually to see who's kind of seen the most colleges. I've lost track, but I'm probably well over 400 or 500. Larry's at the same. And it gives us the expertise to talk about colleges, of what they're seeing recently, what's happening on campus, seeing schools in different parts of the country to be able to speak to kids that look at different parts. And it lets us think outside the box and see what's going on within the college world. I was on a college tour last March when basically midway through the tour, they told me to go home because it was March 17th and COVID was kind of changing the world as we spoke. So that was an interesting experience. Since then, we've stick with virtual tours, but I hope to get to more campuses this year in 2021. Our core philosophies as a firm are really to empower students to help make decisions to find the right fit for college. How do we do that? We help them manage this workflow of to-dos during the application process. It can be kind of daunting, and we kind of help manage the project management of that. And the right fit is guaranteed. We guarantee it so much that we want you to talk academically, socially, and financially about what is the right fit. We'll get into details there. We cover college admissions, career planning, and financial aid. There aren't a lot of firms that do all of that, and we have expertise in all of those sectors. The rest of any conversation is based upon thinking about what are our students' dreams. We walk in with some students who have very specific dreams and goals. It could be academic, it could be school-based, it could be life-based. And we have other students who change their mind 10 times. It doesn't matter to us, but we focus on helping them with those dreams and developing checkpoints along the way. Maybe it's application checkpoints, things they need to do to get experience, things they need to do academically, because it's very stressful to attempt to do things at the last minute or to do things at the unknown. Planning early, starting early is a great way to reduce that stress, and that's one of the expertises of helping to find the right fit. So as you'll see, when we start talking about college planning, we actually put out freshman timeline. And what I'm referring to as high school freshmen. So lots of different people out there, maybe you have high school students, maybe you're thinking about this long term, but the high school process for high school students of planning for college actually starts the summer before freshman year high school. Why? Because when you apply to college, you fill in an activities list that says, what did you do 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, and it includes the summer. Well, the summer before 9th grade is included in that list. So kids should start thinking about, well, what activities are they doing over the summer? Sometimes the classes they choose freshman year of high school are build upon one another, and so the freshman year class will lead towards the senior year class. So we advise students about helping find the right fit for classes, how to explore summer opportunities, whether that's in person or virtual. There's lots of things out there depending on where the world takes us to help kids stay active and explore different things. For parents, you can start discussing about a financial aid strategy, because come sophomore year, you'll see at the bottom there that need-based assistance for college is based on income starting on January 1st of their sophomore year. So it's based on the prior year income. So when they apply for financial aid senior year, it's based off a sophomore year's income. So it's not a problem to start early thinking about that. For sophomores in high school, we're talking to them about how to visit colleges, whether it's online or in person. Again, continuing to talk about classes, clubs, activities. And when students are at this age in high school, it's not a bad idea to start thinking, well, what are you thinking about for career majors? Many colleges really have you apply to a specific major, not just a college. So it's good to start exploring that. You know, if a student's interested in engineering, maybe they want to do a pre-college program of, you know, building a robot. If they're interested in sports management, UMass Amherst has a great program in sports management as a pre-college program. So starting to think about what those majors are, and not saying, you know, this is definitely what you're going to do the rest of your life, but more of exploring it. How could it impact the colleges you look at? How would getting that experience help your college application? Are all conversations to start to have sophomore year. When it comes to junior year, here's some things to think about of this slide has literally changed in the last 2 days in that subject testing for the SATs is going away. So what we tell clients thinking about standardized testing, SAT or ACT, is you can take either. Doesn't matter which one you take. Colleges accept both the SAT and ACT. But many colleges have gone test optional, and many of them will stay that way for several years. And what test optional really means is if a student does well, it can help them. If they don't do well, it's not going to hurt them. That a college looks at their average test scores, and students submit if they're above average. And if they're not above average, they just don't submit it. And colleges kind of don't preclude students who may have just focused on other things. So they're looking at a wide variety of things to determine admission. And now that they've gone test optional, it's just not one of the criteria for many of them. So during junior year, students may start the year off by taking a PSAT, which is a practiced SAT through their high school. The school will administer it and give it. And then they may take an ACT to compare and then focus on one or the other. They don't need to take both. They can focus on whichever one makes more sense. Students will start to develop a college list, what schools are thinking about visiting, have an interest in, that type of thing, because junior year is really when, if you do athletics, that's when you really start to get recruited. If you're doing music or arts, that's when they really start to plan auditions or programming. So there's a lot going on junior year in that recruiting process. In the spring of junior year, you revise a college list, you visit schools, open houses, and continue to revise what classes you'll take senior year of high school, because that will be a big part of college applications. And that final summer before senior year is a great time to explore, again, majors or what you might want to focus on in college. Students will also start to get letters of recommendation at the end of junior year. So we talk about How do you ask for those? How do you help a teacher write them? How do you get an outside the letter of recommendation from a non-teacher? And how to buoy those applications as well. So the summer before senior year is a really busy time, and we want to take advantage of the opportunity to reduce stress. Working on college applications in the fall of senior year will be stressful because there's a lot of things going on. So we work with most of our clients to start and finish their college essay or personal statement, because you might not have realized this, but it says brainstorm and edit 5 to 50 supplemental works. Why is there such a big range in that number? Because some colleges ask you to write 2 essays. UMass Amherst, for example, says, why do you want to major in your subject matter and why do you want to attend UMass? Other colleges may ask 8 to 10 supplemental essay questions. Some of them, in addition, maybe, why do you want to go to this college? What are you interested in studying? But some of them say, introduce yourself to your freshman roommate. What do you want them to know about you? Or one of my personal favorites this year was, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Solve that problem mathematically, philosophically, environmentally, whatever you want to do. That was a question from the University of Chicago, and I had a student write an essay this year who actually did the math and said, well, a woodchuck can cut down 2 trees a day and pile them this high, and if you do that over a whole year, he could chuck this amount of wood. And it's kind of a clever way to answer it. I know that might sound weird, but what the colleges are trying to look at is, how do students think? How creative are they? How outside the box do they think? And so coming up with how to write those essays is good to think about over the summer and brainstorm and work out and all that kind of stuff. So depending on the number of schools a kid applies to, might radically change the number of essays you have to write. Many colleges are really, really interested in how you demonstrate interest in them, meaning, how do you communicate with the admissions staff? How do you visit? How do you tell that college you want to be there? I tell kids all the time, as nervous as you are about going to college, colleges are just as nervous about filling their freshman class. And every dean of admissions wants to make sure they get every seat filled. They want to make sure they have the best students possible. So they're nervous as well. And they want to know who's interested in them just as much as kids want to know who might accept them as well. So we talk to students about how to get the most out of tours and really see the college for what it is. I mentioned working on essays on the summer before senior year because senior year is very busy. The student may need to interview for a college. They may take the SAT or ACT one final time. They're getting letters of recommendation. They're working towards October deadlines for applications as well as financial aid and scholarships. A lot of times the students think, well, I can apply to scholarships later, but many colleges have a bucket of money. First people to put their hand in the bucket get the scholarships, the people later may not get as much. So there's an incentive to apply for scholarships early in the process. In the spring of senior year, students might be visiting school one more time, overnight campus, hopefully in the future with COVID going away. But getting the most out of college visits is important so the student can get at what is that right fit and how they figure out how to pay for college and how do they make a decision later about where they want to go. So you may have heard that a lot of colleges have an application called the Common App. And the Common App is good at a lot of colleges, but it's only good at 900 of 3,700 colleges across the US. Just a moment. Several colleges have their own application system. So University of California, Texas, and even locally, MIT and Westfield State have their own application system. What that just means for students is it may be additional work, but we've worked with all the different application systems. They're just sometimes extra details on how to fill them out. Many colleges use a consortium application. These are just some examples from some state schools. No bad, no good, just things for students to realize that it might be a little bit trickier or the extra steps they may have to take in the process. Many students now are filling in applications with things that aren't paper-based. So they're using a website called Slide Room to submit a science fair project, engineering, robot, music concert, them playing the violin, all that kind of stuff. More and more colleges are going this way to kind of see things that aren't paper-based. And many colleges have gone test optional, and many more may continue that trend in the future. So we work with all of our students to apply to colleges in October, even if the application is later. And here, let me explain why. So some students decide to apply early decision. Early decision is a binding contract. If you apply to that college and are accepted, you have to go. There's advantages at some schools, not as much at others. So at local Holy Cross College in Worcester, they admit about 60 to 70% of early decision applicants and about 30% of regular decision applicants. That's a huge difference at that college, obviously. At some other colleges, the difference may be between 8% and 6%. Well, 2% is a lot, but not as much as 40% at some other schools. So there's an advantage of how that plays out. But why we have our students apply to colleges in October is the following scenario. The deadline for early decision is October 15th, November 1st, something like that, and they notify the student in middle of December. Many regular decision deadlines are January 1st. How's it going to go for a high school student if they only apply early decision, find out October 15th they aren't accepted, and then try to do 8 to 10 college applications by January 1st? Not a very good recipe for Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, family time. Instead, if a student submits all their applications in October, in addition to removing that stress, it also tells all of the colleges the student is good at submitting things early, wants to go to that college, demonstrating interest, proactive. So there's a real advantage of submitting things early. Some colleges have early action, which means you apply and you find out early. You just don't have to go if you're accepted. Some asterisks in that process are these 6 schools or 7 schools which don't do single choice. They do single choice early action, which means that's the only college you can apply to early action. It just limits their competition. It doesn't require you to go, but it just means it limits the number of schools you can apply to. Rolling admission is fun. You apply, you find out 2 to 6 weeks later. So some schools open that up in August. So kids are finding out in early September they've been admitted rolling admission and they could go to that college. I think our firm had a kid this year who applied like August 5th or 6th, and he knew before he was going back to school, to high school in the fall, where he was going to college. I always advise those kids to not tell too many kids at high school because they may run into some bullying of kids being jealous. But hey, it's a great scenario to be in college that early. Scholarships, again, early in the process is better. The deadline may be October, and we advise applying as soon as that is possible. And the University of California is just kind of weird. No early, no late, just November 1st to November 30th. Everybody notified in March. Just something to pay attention. It's something different if you're interested in going to the West Coast. So we work with our students to apply to about 10 colleges. Some apply to less, some apply to more, but about 10 is where we like our students to kind of fit in. More than that, and they struggle to answer the why do you want to go to this college question. Less than that, and they're leaving options on the table. So when they apply to 10 colleges, we look for them to apply to 2 to 3 safety schools, 2 to 3 probable schools, 2 to 3 reach schools. And what does that mean? Well, a reach school is one that's, to be honest, just hard to get into. It's the students' grades and test scores are average or below average, or the school admits only 10% of applicants. So it means they're turning away kids with perfect grades and perfect test scores. Those schools don't need to give scholarships or merit money because they get a lot of applicants as it is. A safety school, on the other hand, one where the student is in the top 25% of applicants, may get merit scholarships to bring the cost down significantly. I've had several students apply to private schools this year that are cheaper than UMass because the school has given pretty significant scholarships to reduce the cost. Some students, though, forget, they think, oh, that's a safety school, and they don't take into account program, for example. Well, nursing, computer science, engineering, and business are the 4 big programs that really can become harder to get into than the general college. UMass Amherst Nursing, for example, admitted 12% of applicants last year. That's almost like an Ivy League college, and they expect resumes like an Ivy League college to get into nursing at UMass. So some kids need to factor that in when they're making their list. If they're applying to computer science, they got to assume that a lot of the schools are reaches to get into, and they need to consider that. You know, athletics, I tell kids sometimes if they're just doing sports in college, a reach school is one where you sit on the bench and you hope you play. A safety school is the one where you're the star player and they're excited to have you start. So there's no right, there's no wrong, there's just advantages to different schools. And things can factor into what makes a safety school for one kid and not for the kid sitting right next to him. So you go to an engineering school, they may be 80% male guys. So a girl applying has a much better shot of getting in. Just the demographics that works out. 55% of the students going to college now across the country are female. So across the board, it's actually a little harder for females, which makes up in some of those majors we just talked about. Computer science, engineering, business are a little easier. So we talked a moment ago about how to get help for colleges. How do you get a scholarship? How do you reduce the cost? One where a student adds value. So it could be an athletic scholarship. It could be academic based off of raising grades, test scores, strength of curriculum, any of those. Some schools just give it based on leadership that has results. And that's not always class president. It could be somebody who volunteers in their community with community service or leads a group, and something specific that the college is looking for. So there's a lot of ways to get into the finances of college. And I'm going to let Larry take over now and talk a little bit about the financial side of college planning and be able to talk a little bit about how you can think about financial aid planning, filling out the financial aid forms, and how that fits into the college search process. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment and give Larry just a sec to pull up his screen and take over from there.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. That was excellent. So financial aid. One thing is that financial aid needs to be filed every single year. So if you're looking for need-based aid, you're going to need to fill out the FAFSA, which is a free form. And that gives every family loans, students or parents. Some colleges like UMass require the FAFSA to be filled out, even if you're just looking for merit money and you're not going to be need-based. Every school is different. What's really important to understand is financial aid, as Aaron had mentioned earlier, is based on the prior years of income. Effectively, it starts January 1st of the sophomore year of the student in high school. So that means you need to be thinking seriously during freshman year of what is our strategy for paying for college. Are we looking for need-based aid? Are we looking for loans? Are we looking for merit money? And understanding that. Understanding that it's going to be based on your prior years' tax returns, adjusted gross income, as well as other information is important to understand. It's particularly important to understand that for parents that are divorced, separated, never married, and for parents that own a business. Assets are counted at the time you fill out the application. So typically the application is filled out in October of the student's senior year of high school. So that's when the assets are counted. Income drives this calculation more than assets. And if the parents have gotten remarried, the step parents' income and assets get counted also in all cases. The number of students that are in college at the same time can also affect need-based aid. That is going to stop in the next 2 years, according to the CARES Act, which was just passed in December. But for right now, it means having twins or triplets or quintuplets is really an advantage because your income and assets are effectively divided by the number of students you have. Some important things to understand is merit-based aid stays fixed for all 4 years of college. So that means if they give you $20,000 a year, it's going to be $20,000 a year, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year. But at the same time, the cost of college is going to continue to go up. So that $20,000 is going to pay a lower and lower percentage of the cost of college every year. Need-based aid changes every year based on income and assets, but also based on cost of attendance. So as the cost of college goes up, if your income and assets stay the same, actually you're likely to get more money, not less money, as you go through this process. Let me give you an example. Here we have 4 colleges, and for this family, UMass Amherst list price, the cost of attendance here would be about $28,600. The list price for attending Princeton would have been $58,400. But when we add in the expected family contribution, the real out-of-pocket cost for this family for UMass ends up just under $22,000, and Princeton ends up at under $16,000. Gettysburg ends up at $27,600. So you're getting a private school education at almost state school prices. NYU doesn't like being generous with money, whether you're need-based or merit-based. Rice, one of the best science and engineering schools in the country, would literally cost the same as UMass for this family. So it's important to understand when you're choosing a college, the economics of attending that college also come into play. For divorced and separated families, this can even be a bigger issue. Here we have a family that has a $150,000 adjusted gross income, about $60,000 in assets, equity in their home of about $225,000. UMass would cost about $31,000. UVM would cost $47,000. Tufts $35,000. Vanderbilt just under $38,000. If this family was divorced, depending on who was the custodial parent, Vanderbilt could now cost $14,600, while UMass would still cost $20,000. So the high price school may not be the high price school when you're done filing financial aid. So it's important to know this when you're choosing a school. One question I get is, should wealthy families fill out the financial aid forms? And the answer to this is, there are many good reasons why the answer is yes. For many families, the answer is they want their child to have some skin in the game. So the student can take out a Stafford loan, which is $5,500 as a freshman, $6,500 as a sophomore, $7,500 junior and senior year. That loan is completely to the student. It has nothing to do with the parent, and it has no co-signing to it. But it's a way for the student to have some skin in the game. They'll end up leaving college owing about $30,000. We have some parents that have gone ahead and said, well, if the student gets this type of grade, then we'll pay for that Stafford loan. If the student gets less than that grade, we're not paying for the Stafford loan. The other thing for some families is they want a loan as part of a financial or insurance or cash flow strategy. The PLUS loan from the federal government comes with life and disability insurance on both the student and the parent. We've had some parents and some students who can't get life or disability insurance. So this loan actually becomes a great financial investment. Some colleges we mentioned before require financial aid forms to be filled even for merit money. In some families, the answer is I want to show that we really are not need-based, because frankly, every college is a business. And as a business, if they know that they're not going to have to give you money, they're going to be a lot happier in taking that child. And some outside scholarships require forms to be filled out. So it's not unusual for families that are not need-based to still fill out financial aid forms. What's changed since COVID? Frankly, a lot has changed since COVID. The biggest thing that most people are aware of is SATs and ACTs have become test optional at many colleges. In fact, they've become test optional at the most selective schools in the country. In addition, subject tests and essay sections of the SAT and ACT have been completely dropped. So taking the SAT or the ACT and doing well and doing above the average is a plus. But if you do below the average for that school, you don't have to submit them. So it doesn't hurt you. So this can be a real advantage. The thing is that when schools go test optional, the number of applications surge 10 to 30%. And the reality is, at least for the early decision schools, some schools have seen a 50 or 60% surge in applications. Now, in some cases, those are viable students who just had poor test scores and weren't applying in prior years. In other cases, it's a below average student with below average test scores that's now applying to an Ivy League school thinking they might get in. That's not going to change. The other issue that's happened with the coronavirus is financial aid may be limited because many of the colleges are facing financial challenges. This includes state and private schools. Many state schools are being impacted dramatically by the coronavirus because their costs have gone up and the revenue they get from the state has gone down. This will continue in the next couple of years. Physically visiting colleges is not possible in the current environment. So virtual visits are the norm. The great news is this makes it easier than ever for you to go visit a campus, see a campus, walk around using Google Maps, go to info sessions. You don't have to spend the money on driving or flying there. And you can reach out to professors or other students easily through Zoom or Skype or FaceTime. So it's easier than ever and more cost effective than ever to visit colleges. Because most of the schools don't have test scores anymore, they're much more focused on high school curriculum. Are you taking the most rigorous courses offered at your high school? Now, it's easy to say, go take the hardest courses, but every student needs to have balance in their life. So that balance is very important. You don't want to take too many very difficult courses because all your grades will drop. You want to have some fun. Fun is very important at any age in your life. Extracurricular activities are very highly valued. Are you giving back to the community? Are you involved in athletics? The important thing with extracurricular activities is not what you do, but what you learn from them, what skills you're developing, what attributes you're developing that the colleges want. So one of the things we work with students on all the time is, what are the extracurricular activities that they enjoy being the key word, that the colleges are going to value? And how can they focus on those extra attributes so they become a very desirable student to those colleges and have lots of fun? Essays take on much more importance through this process. So we work with students. Typically, students will write 3 drafts of an essay. And if you have 10 colleges you're applying to, and each college has 2 supplemental essays, and you go through 3 drafts of each essay, that's a lot of writing. And it takes about an hour per draft, which is one reason why we really recommend that the student work on these during the summer before their senior year. Plus that way they can enjoy their senior year a lot more. And they find out about where they got in sooner. So what do? We offer a free initial consultation with the family, with both parents and the student. This is an opportunity to get to know the student and the parents, and make sure that this is something the student wants to do, something that adds value to the family, and something where we think it's going to work. We interview the student and the parents. If you engage us, we come up with a list of schools. It's the student's list, not our list, so we revise it regularly And as the student researches schools, the school list is likely to change. We keep families aware of all the tasks and meetings through an online portal that we have. So parents and students have access to the same information. We try to keep everybody aware, so everybody's on the same page, and that lowers the stress. We develop a student positioning strategy, course selection, after-school activities, internships. We try to make sure these are all things the student enjoys and finds interesting. We'll come up with a visit strategy. How to attack doing these online visits, or what happens when I can go visit a college. We'll revise the list because as students visit colleges virtually or in person, they decide that maybe it wasn't what I thought it was. We'll brainstorm and edit essays. We'll coach the student on doing college interviews. We'll review the acceptances. We also offer an option for doing career and majors assessment through a 90-minute online assessment vehicle. Generates a 30 to 40 page report written in English, not psychobabble. And we can also complete the financial aid forms. So that gives you an idea of what we do and how we do it, and how you can find the college solution.
Great, thank you, Larry. So if anybody has any questions for Larry and Aaron, then please feel free to ask in the Q&A icon down there or in the chat. And while we're waiting, I had a couple of questions. So could you give an example maybe of a student or a family that you've really been able to help recently that just made you feel so happy that you were able to help them and they were able to meet their goals, especially with applying to certain colleges or universities?
So I'll give you one example. I had one family and the student had learning differences. And they were able to get into a great school that was going to give them support for their learning differences. And they're doing well in that university. They're now there in the second semester of their freshman year.
Okay.
So that was a great example.
Yeah. How about you, Aaron?
Maybe it's not the happiest subject, but it was definitely rewarding. I had a student who lost his father this year in June, and retained us right amongst that, knowing college wasn't going to wait for life to slow down, and so I had to kind of handle the college process while handling his father not being around. How do you handle that in the college application process? We had difficult conversations about I'm leaving mom behind, and just things that weren't college based, but just kind of life based. But he kind of underestimated himself a little bit, and he got accepted to a few colleges that I don't think he expected. And so he has not made a decision yet, but it's been a rewarding process, just kind of help with just the moving forward process of finding next steps. And they've been a great family to work with. And I know that's not every family has something that dramatic, but it has been rewarding to work with them. They've just been.
Great, thank you. It looks like we do have a question. Do you guys see that? It looks like Chuck is, and I don't know if you would like to maybe speak with the person separately.
No, it's fine. We can.
Okay.
So our services are $6,200. It's a one-time fee. It's the same whether we start with a freshman, sophomore, or junior. And if the student wants careers and majors assessment also, that's an additional $500. And if they want work with scholarships and filling out the financial aid forms, which we'll process for them, that's an additional $650. Our fees change typically June 1st every year. And the first meeting with both parents and the student is complimentary. It's a chance to get to know us and make sure we're adding the value you want.
Great, thank you. What about, could you tell me a little bit about, are there things that people say when you tell them that they're like, I had no idea beyond what you've discussed today? Maybe certain little key pieces of information that you share with them that seems to make a light bulb turn on for them when going through this process?
So one of the key things that I think surprises everybody is that literally the college application says, what have you been doing since you left 8th grade?
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean you should be doing things because colleges are interested in it. It's sort of like doing your taxes. If you show up at your accountant on April 1st and say, I need to file my taxes, the accountant's going to say, great, we'll document all the mistakes you made last year.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this is an opportunity to avoid mistakes. So I have a lot of families who say to us, I'm so happy because I can call you and ask you a question. I don't always like the answer you give me, but I know I'm getting the truth. And that way I'm not sitting around with my friends and hearing about their stories about their third cousin twice removed and what they did.
Right.
And they know that the answer is to them specifically. And as Aaron mentioned earlier, the answer for you is very likely to be different than the answer to the student sitting next to you or your twin or to your cousin that's twice removed. So it's those little things. It's one way of lowering the stress. We have an unfair advantage in this process, and that is we're not mom or dad.
Mm.
So having that independent voice that everybody can turn to. In fact, I got an email this morning from one of my clients who has a very diligent child, but the child is dragging their feet right now. And they were just happy that they could vent to somebody that was not going to be judgmental.
Yeah.
Right? And I told her that she was not the only mother that felt that way.
Absolutely.
And I guess mine is kind of around majors of, some people go into this process saying like, well, I don't know what I want to major in college, but then they list a bunch of colleges where that's not really an option, meaning there's some colleges that kind of make you pick. Like, they're not saying you got to choose what specific type of engineering, but you're not applying to the University of Michigan. You're applying to the business school, the engineering school, the English school. And so they make those decisions. Mm-hmm. For every one of those types of colleges, there's another college that says you could double major in biology and philosophy if you want, and we're going to train you for a job that doesn't exist 40 years from now. So, we don't really, I don't want to say we don't care what you major in, but we're teaching you reading, writing, research, arithmetic. And so there's a little bit of everything for everybody, but there are multiple different types of colleges. And that's why, again, we talk about the right fit, because, some people are looking for very specific type of training and others want, future plans after that. Mm-hmm. And while I'm speaking, I saw the question from Chuck. His question was, how are kids viewed that need to work after school? So you have fewer after school activities. Work is an after school activity. So in that list of activities, I'll even reference the story I just told of the family who had his father pass away. We put that on his application because why did he not do an after school club? Because he was driving his dad to chemotherapy for a year. That is what he did with his free time. They want to know what you're doing with your free time. Sitting and playing video games is only okay if you're going to make the esports team in college and play World of Warcraft on the varsity team. And you might think I'm joking, but there are varsity scholarships for kids playing video games now. So the point there is, like, colleges want to know what you're doing, but it can be a wide range of community service, jobs, helping family. We've had kids that have tutored, a younger sibling who might have special needs, or taking care of mom and dad, or having a job. It's not a what, it's how much and what did the student learn from it? That the college wants to know, what type of person is this? Not have they checked the box. I get that question all the time. Like, what do I need to add to my resume to check the box? Nothing. You need to add something that you'll learn from and helps you grow in your personality.
Great, thank you. Anything else that you guys wanted to share, touch upon?
One thing that I want to share that's very important that leads to your presentation, Abigail, is the fact that when students turn 18, they become adults. So it's important they have a healthcare proxy, an adorable power of attorney. That was true before COVID. With COVID, it's even more important. Students travel all the time. We have stories of parents that had troubles because they didn't have those documents.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. That's a great lead in here, Larry. So,
and the quick lead I'll give for you too, Abby, is I always recommend we have a student apply to a school close to home. It's a question we get all the time now of COVID, am I going to be online school? Am I going to be close? So we recommend all of our families have an option close to home. Maybe something happens in your family. So I have families that say, hey, I only want to go to California. And I'm like, well, have something close to home, because you might not think about it, but life happens. And, unfortunately, again, this happens to our firm every year. And so people lose jobs, things happen to mom and dad, whatever. Having that close to home option is sometimes not a financial safety, but a life safety. And so we recommend to all of our clients that doesn't matter where you're applying to college, you put something close to home as a backup. And I think, again, that's something good for people to kind of keep in mind.
Oh, looks like we have one more question there.
Do you want to answer that one, Larry?
All right. So the 529 question of, if it's in the grandparent's name or it's in the parent's name, what's that mean? So the 529, first of all, it's important to consult a fiduciary, a financial planner in this. But for most colleges, the asset of a 529 won't get counted if it's in the grandparent's name. But when the grandparent uses that money to pay for that student's college, then it gets counted as the child's income. And the child's income will count greatly in the financial aid calculation. So it's one of these things where you really need to understand the full ramifications and your specific situation, because what's right for one of your grandchildren may not be right for another grandchild. So it's important to understand your specific situation to answer that question with any realism.
Great. Thank you, Larry. Aaron, did you need to head out, or are you? Yeah. Okay.
I do need to head out. And I appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, you saw my contact information. I'd be happy to talk with anyone.
Great. Thank you. Have a good evening. So I'm going to move into my portion of the evening here, and I'm going to share my screen. I make no promises about doing it well. And so if there's a little bit of technical difficulties, Larry might help me. So just bear with me as we work this out, okay? Okay. How is that? Is that okay, Larry? Can you see the whole thing?
That's perfect.
Yay, did it, success. All right. So today I wanted to talk to everybody a little bit about the essential legal documents for your college-age children. So as Larry was mentioning, we really want to focus on what happens when your child turns 18? So when they turn 18, you essentially as the parents lose legal authority to make healthcare and financial decisions for them. So in order to be able to continue to do that, you want to have some documents in place that they have signed. So we're really going to review what those documents are, what happens if you don't have those documents in place, so what kind of roadblocks you'll encounter, and also talk just a little bit about incapacity and if your child were to actually pass away, and how that interplays with the documents that we suggest that you have in place. So I like to use a scenario when I am going through this, talking about these documents. And so we have Miranda, and she's our college age child. She's 21. She attends college in Western Massachusetts. She has a checking account in her sole name. She was recently in a severe car accident and incapacitated and is in the hospital. Her parents are Susan and Peter, and they are married and living in Dedham. So one thing I want to bring to your attention is, what does incapacity mean? So incapacity means if you are alive, but you are unable to make your own decisions on things. So again, maybe in that car accident and perhaps in a coma, and so cannot do things like decide whether or not to have surgery, or make sure that the utility bill at the apartment where they're at college continues to get paid, things along those lines. So if we're talking about Miranda, she's in this car accident. And so Susan and Peter are alerted as to what has happened to Miranda. And now they need to be able to make healthcare and financial decisions on her behalf. So there's a couple ways that they can do this. One is through the court system, or two, through having legal documents signed by Miranda after she turns age 18, so in advance of something occurring. So I want to go into a little bit about what happens in the event that there's no documents in place for Miranda. So in that situation, essentially, Susan and Peter are going to have to get authority from the court by being appointed as Miranda's conservator and or guardian. So in Massachusetts, we have a bifurcated system. And if they need to make financial decisions on Miranda's behalf, they have to be appointed as the conservator. If they have to make well-being and healthcare decisions, they have to be appointed as Miranda's guardian. So it may be a case where they need to act in both capacities, or maybe only in one capacity. The takeaway from this is that essentially, to be able to perform with legal authority, the things that they would normally do already as parents, if she were a minor, they can't necessarily do unless they have these appointments from the court. And so they have to essentially petition and be appointed by the court. And that can take some time, and it can be a little bit expensive. And there's usually court involvement along the way. And it's also, to a certain extent, public record. So the other option, and a way to avoid having to go through getting a conservatorship and a guardianship through the court, is to have Miranda sign documents while she is, after she turns age 18, and while she is of full capacity and competent. And the three documents for her to sign are the power of attorney, healthcare proxy, and a HIPAA authorization. So these are the three essential incapacity documents for her to think about putting into place. So to start with, a power of attorney is the document that is going to kind of step into that role of conservator. So essentially, under the power of attorney, somebody is appointed as the attorney in fact, and that attorney in fact can make decisions, financial decisions on behalf of Miranda. So Susan and Peter could be appointed as Miranda's attorney in fact together, or you could do something where maybe Susan acts as Miranda's primary attorney in fact, and then Peter is the backup to Susan. So the attorney in fact has several different powers, and you want it to be a really comprehensive power of attorney document. So for example, under the power of attorney, Susan and Peter would be able to file income taxes on Miranda's behalf, access her bank accounts, again, I talked about it a little bit earlier, pay those various bills that are hanging around out there, deal with filing health insurance claims, maybe insurance claims with regards to the car accident. They could also deal with selling or transferring any personal property. And finally, to tie it all into kind of what we're talking about tonight, is that they can have specific powers to take action with regards to Miranda's matriculation at the college or university out there in Western Massachusetts. So they have legal power or legal authority under the power of attorney to be able to deal with financial aid issues, deal with tuition, maybe withdraw her from the semester or from the school because it's going to be a long recovery period, or even deal with any residency issues that show up during that time. So it really is a powerful and important tool to have on hand to be able to help Miranda out. The next document is the healthcare proxy. The healthcare proxy is the document that appoints a healthcare agent to make healthcare decisions on behalf of your child, your young adult. And that person is called a healthcare agent. And essentially, the healthcare agent needs to have the ability to consult with the medical care providers, also be aware of, for example, Miranda's maybe wishes and religious beliefs and moral beliefs, to make a healthcare decision that would be the same decision that, or as close to the same decision as that he or she thinks Miranda would make in certain situations when Miranda can't speak for herself. So a few other powers that healthcare agent has are that they can consent to or refuse treatment for a person. They can admit or discharge a person from a facility. They can authorize administration of medication, and then they can also hire or discharge medical personnel. So with the healthcare proxy, again, for this particular document, it's best to name a primary healthcare agent and then have a backup or alternate healthcare agent named. What we typically recommend with the healthcare proxies is that you provide physical copies to not only to the healthcare agent who's been appointed, but also provide copies to the student health center as well as a primary care physician, so that everybody involved has that information in their records. We also provide the documents, the signed healthcare proxy, via email now, so that you can basically download a copy on your smartphone, or at least have it handy and accessible in your email in case you can't grab that physical copy while you're running out the door because of an emergency. So the third document is the HIPAA authorization form. And so this document basically lists individuals that can communicate and also receive your medical records and medical information from medical care providers. If you're not listed, you can't receive that information under federal law. So typically it might be the healthcare agents are listed, so Susan and Peter, and sometimes if there's an adult sibling, then that person is listed too, or I've also had aunts or uncles who are listed on the HIPAA authorization, just to allow those folks to be able to gather medical information as necessary about what's going on. So I also wanted to touch upon very quickly what happens if Miranda were to pass away. So typically a document that's really important to have is a last will and testament. And the last will and testament does a few things. First off, it names a person called a personal representative who essentially can manage the estate or the assets that are remaining out there if Miranda passes away. And then the will also says what happens to those assets. When I'm talking about estate assets, they can be tangible personal property. So that's things like furniture, clothing, collectibles, artwork, etc. I'm also talking about things like bank accounts or investment accounts. And with particular attention to, it's accounts that are owned in that individual's name. So there's no joint owner and there's no beneficiaries listed on those accounts. So those are the type of accounts that go through the process, the probate process. And that's essentially, it's the court-involved process to appoint a personal representative and give them the legal authority to access the various assets and then make the distributions out to the various people that are listed in the last will and testament. If you do not have a last will and testament, then the intestacy laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts they come into play. So they're essentially default laws. Intestacy simply means without a will. So those laws come into play, again, if there is no last will and testament that has been prepared. And that might be okay. So under the current intestacy laws of Massachusetts, essentially, if Miranda passes away, she doesn't have a spouse and she doesn't have any children, then her assets flow back to her parents in equal shares. So just to summarize, there's 3 really important documents to have for your child once they turn age 18 and older. And I certainly work with folks who are with young adults who are in their mid-20s and even late 20s to at least have these essential incapacity documents in place. So the power of attorney, the healthcare proxy, the HIPAA authorization form. And then also another really helpful document to have in place in case if somebody passes away, is that last will and testament. A common question that I get is, well, if I have a child that lives here in Massachusetts, but they're going to college in, I think California was a good example that was used earlier. Do these documents still apply? And the answer is yes. So as long as your child has their permanent address, they're technically a resident of Massachusetts. If they're in college out in California, then those documents are still applicable and they are valid for use. So that was really it for me. I'm going to stop sharing the screen here and then I can speak with you about any questions that you might have. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for me out there?
So Abigail, when should parents start to think about getting these documents?
That's a great question. Thank you, Larry. So I actually have parents who are contacting me when their child is 17 and maybe about a month away from turning 18, maybe a month to 2 weeks. And so they want to make sure that those documents are essentially ready to go very quickly after that child turns 18. I also have parents who work with me to help their maybe 30-year-old child have at least the basic incapacity or basic last will and testament in place. And I know that for me personally, it's a family tradition to do those documents. So my grandfather had my mom sign basic estate plan documents when she turned 18, and then my mom did the same thing for me. So we're just gonna keep that going, I think, as long as we can. And I do see a question here. Does the HIPAA authorization only apply in cases of incapacity? I understand that the power of attorney and healthcare proxy do. No, I think it's my understanding that the HIPAA authorization, once you give that document and say that I can access this person's medical records, it's applicable at any point. So it's not necessarily just incapacity. So it could be used at any point while the person is alive. So for that reason, we may not hand out the HIPAA authorization until there's actually it's actually needed or actually needed. It's usually just the healthcare proxy that we suggest giving to the healthcare agent or to the let's say student health center or to the your primary care physicians. And then the HIPAA authorization, you have that on hand that you can pull out and use at some point later on. Let's see. I also have a second question. We have a special needs trust for my son. Should he have a will that leaves to his trust at age 18? So that is a great question, Brenda. I think that I would probably want to speak with you a little bit more about what's going on there. It might be a really good idea for him to at least have a power of attorney, healthcare proxy, and HIPAA in place. And then we would want to take a closer look at what he should do with having a will and whether and how that will should fund into how that will should perhaps flow into a special needs trust or perhaps not. It might be something that we say that any of his assets go to another person or to another trust. So I'd probably want to have a longer conversation with you to figure out how to best answer that. Any other questions?
Abigail, one thing that pops up with a lot of my clients is they're thinking about their child going off to college, but when I ask, well, when did you update your will and trusts? And they go, oh, when we had them done when the child was 6.
Oh, yes.
So is that a good answer?
No. So I would suggest that your updating your estate plan is very dependent on what's going on in your life. So I think that that's a really great example of maybe there's a big life change happening, and once your child is safely off to college, re-examine your estate plan and see if it should be updated or how it could be updated. Does that answer your question sufficiently, Larry?
Yes, that's perfect. So
great. Thank you. Any other questions out there? All right. I don't see any. So I think that we'll wrap things up here. Larry, I just want to say thank you again so much for your time this evening to speak with our clients. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun. And if anybody has any questions, please reach out to Aaron or myself.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you. You too.